Week 2, Day 2. So, we are just supposed to stay here for some random lady. Lynn yelled out to Sikalai, and more while both of them hid in the foliage. Juno just posted herself on a large rock, practicing her scribble magic within her notebook. They both were filled in when walking down the path to the Wall of Fangs, taking another trail down just 2 hours away. They will meet a client who is a female. That's the only information the two orcs were willing to give. Yeah, she's new to the area, so she might be late. Moore said to Lynn, who just sighed and took a gander at her pink nails. Juno could only doodle in her notebook, wondering what this mysterious woman could be. They both flicked their ears as they heard rustling within the unknown dense forest. Once a noise was heard, the orc brothers hid deeper into their bushes, fading from sight. Juno questioned why they were hiding in her head. Most beastkin can smell an orc from a couple of meters away. The figure appeared from the opening, as both centelopes were shocked at who they saw. The individual was wearing plated heavy armor, one that covered their whole body in steel, a sizable sword on her hip, and a gray cape that was filled with worn holes. The plates had some etchings of yellow decals within the cracks, with a yellow lion chimera on her shoulder. "Halt, citizens. State your business here," the knight said under her visor, yet the two did notice that it was female. Juno and Lynn looked at each other, confused by the woman's question. "Are you supposed to be her, Miss Knight?" Juno couldn't help but ask, as being a Leoness knight carries a large target on her back. "I was told by weird orcs that I should meet here at the castle landmark down the river, and at this circle spot with the 2 large rocks," the knight said as she pointed to the 2 rocks. One was acting as Juno's seat, and the other as Lynn's shoulder rest. All they had to hear was weird orcs, as they both nodded at each other. "My name is Lynn Moore, and this white pelt is Juno Moore. We are part of the Moore clan." Lynn confirms with the female knight, which made her alternate her gaze between the two. "Oh, you are? Well, you're certainly not what I was expecting." The knight sounded confused as she continued to look at them both. "Were you expecting orcs?" Lynn asked, as it was an obvious choice. The knight shakes her head, crossing her arms in observation. "You two are too pretty and not enslaved," the knight said, as if her hypothesis was going to be the right answer. Juno chuckled, as she kinda had the same thought when she met the orcs. "I assure you, Miss Knight, Moore and Sikalai are one of the only good orcs you will ever meet," Lynn said with pride, having Juno nod to confirm. "Well, I guess if this was an ambush, then you would have killed me already," the knight said as she removed her visor, letting her long golden hair drop. Juno was amazed, for this was the first blonde human she had ever met. She had blue hair and brown eyebrows. These were only rumored to populate the triangle. The knight puts her helmet on the floor, saluting the two with a poster of a soldier. "My name is Sergeant Collie Tarball, 3rd head of the Darkota Knights, as you requested, my lady," she said with a bow, being too formal for Juno. Juno was waving her hands, bumbling as she tried to tell her that wasn't necessary. Lynn was enjoying the treatment, puffing out her modest chest and straightening her back. "It's good of you to come alone. We appreciate your honor," Moore said, as both he and Sickle-Eye emerged from the bushes. Sergeant Tarball screamed when she saw the two very scary-looking orcs coming out of nowhere. They both looked at her blankly as she coughed to regain her composure. "I mean, if you were going to have my head, at least my men would be fine," Tarball said with a defeated tone, laughing like a person who had lost everything. "Moore, why is one of the knights that are in the neck of the woods want dead here?" Lynn said, because she believes that they are walking on a really tight line of politics. "We told you rescue and take a tablet of knowledge," Sickle-Eye said vaguely. "I was promised a place that takes in humans as refugees, if I didn't hear correctly," Tarball told the group, as it was made clear to Juno. The orcs promised Tarball that in exchange for the tablet, they would find a home for her fellow knights. "Are you taking her to the Wall of Fangs?" Juno asked the orcs, as Sickle-Eye gave her a nod. "Wall of Fangs," Tarball repeated with a ponder. "She is going to die," Lynn told Moore. "I'm going to what?" Tarball said, as she flinched at the sudden declaration. "We just got to bring her to Demona," Moore clarified. "A demon. What now?" Tarball said as she readied her sword, looking around the area. "The girls of the Wall are very territorial about their male population. They are not going to accept a woman within their ranks," Juno said with a dabble of caution. "If it means anything, I'm a knight before I am a woman," Tarball said with pride. Juno and Lynn both looked at Moore with a blank face. "She's going to die," both the Centelopes said. "Scene. Please, Miss Demona. He is the reason my unit has survived for so long," Tarball pleads to Demona, who sits in her swivel throne. She was pleading with her to let the Serpent's Lair take refuge with the Walls as well, having a high opinion of him. Juno, Lynn, Sickle-Eye, and Moore stood to the side of this debate, both Blair and Winnie hearing it as well. "I'm sorry, Sergeant Tarball, but there is heavy scrutiny against hunters around here. Even my girl's opinions have been harsh. Taking him in will only cause a mutiny within my walls." Demona tried to reason with Tarball, which only made her frustration boil over. "What is his crime?" Tarball yelled, having the two aides of the Queen snarl at the women. Demona waves them quietly as she feels for the women. Murder of sentient life, burning the forest multiple times, and causing public distress. Demona listed the listing on his bounty, having Tarball ball her fist. "That man has been supplying my injuries for over 2 months, to the point where he's starving himself, where he doesn't get any sleep, where he always comes back with more scars than the day before." Tarball explained to Demona, as if the man were a soothsayer himself. Juno could only hear the woman's plea from this faceless man, one she thought was a heartless bastard. Of course, she never knew the struggle he went through. They were only at the northwest corner of the triangle. It didn't take long for her to get there. A month of terror has no value compared to 4 months of losing and losing more. Juno's face was easy for Lynn to read as she grabbed her hand for comfort. I know what he has been doing, Miss Tarball. He has helped my girls around here. That's the only reason I'm speaking to you, Demona said with a coldness, causing the sergeant to shut her mouth. You're far away from human control. A human saint means nothing in a room filled with beastkin politics. The best I could do for you right now is to accept all of your men and women within my walls and wrap chains around the hunter and put him in a cell, Demona said as she wrapped her fingers together, being firm on her orders. Tarball decided to fall into a plush chair at Demona's table, rubbing her temple from all of the lunacy she was hearing. Juno felt for the woman, but she had been there long enough to know that racial discrimination still held true. Do we have an accord, Sergeant Tarball? Demona said as she tapped her table, as if she was demanding something in return. Juno flicks her ears at this gesture, turning to Moore for explanation. He just shakes his head, telling her that he wasn't going to intervene. Demona knew that she had a tablet of knowledge, more like she was already part of this last-minute plan. Sergeant Tarball clicks her tongue, sliding a tablet to Demona. We will handle the delivery of this find to a reliable source, Moore. Our payment will be 20% of the earnings. Is that fine with you? Demona asked Moore while she side-eyed him. Juno wasn't shocked that this was the plan from the start, yet it still made her feel dirty. After all this pleading, the slayer, no, the hunter would be treated as a criminal. I trust in you, Demona. You were once one of our Delta S before, Moore said with a nod, having the Alpha Lyconian wag her tail for being praised. Sikalai nods at the women as well, slamming his fist on his chest. What if the hunter doesn't comply with your request? Sergeant Tarball asked Demona with a scorn. Demona squinted her eyes with the woman's brave demeanor, yet found it charming. As a prisoner of the wall, no other settlement can dictate a man's fate. He will be under our protection in a cell, but well-fed, hydrated, and rested. It will buy us time to clear his name without other Haven leaders worrying that a hunter is on the loose. Demona fully told the sergeant her plans for him, which made her anger vanish. Juno was relieved, even happy that this was all just a roundabout way to aid the hunter, failing to hide her smile. Lynn pinches her leg, causing her to jolt from the pain, only to have the brown rabbit give her a shark smile. Thank you, Your Majesty. Sergeant Tarball rushes to hug Demona, having Winnie and Blair build aggro. Yet they stopped when they saw their leader blushing with the lady over her. They both gave each other a coy look, sheathing their swords and letting it happen. Demona pushes her off and corrects her demeanor, giving a cough to get back to character. I have 2 males down by the infirmary that wore the symbol of the lion chimera. If you are interested in meeting them. Demona asked the woman over her, crossing her legs to look more sophisticated. Sergeant Tarball gave an ecstatic nod, making the queen of the wall look upon the orcs and centelopes. Would you 2 orcs be so kind as to escort these 3 women down to the infirmary? My girls would think twice about starting a scuffle with 2 big, scary orcs, Demona said with a hint of mischief, having Sickle-Eye smile with a sadistic orc grin. We will be fine gentlemen in your home, Sickle-Eye said with a mischievous laugh. Scene. What Demona said was true. As the party of 5 navigated through the castle, no WOF member dared to get close to them. All this time, Juno felt the stares of hungry women, but they had other things to worry about now. 2 infenrials stood in place at the stairs as their knees trembled from the approaching orcs. Sickle-Eye smiled and gave a loud shout, like a feral tiger was on the loose. The 2 ran down the stairs with their instincts, using their fours and yelping like scared dogs. Sickle-Eye had a hearty laugh as Moore tried to hold his in. Behind them were Lynn and Juno, while Lynn just walks casually with her arms around her head. She flicks her ears to see delight in Juno. Juno did have a devilish smile across her face, one Lynn didn't know she could have. The power of orcs is intoxicating, Juno said as she looked at all the infenrials keeping their distance. Lynn chuckles slightly, returning to her stride. Don't let the power get to you, Lynn said jokingly, as Sergeant Tarball followed silently in the back. They passed through the door that housed the infirmary, seeing that no one was around. Only a curtain area was misplaced. They could assume that the knights were behind the makeshift room, but it was rather quiet. Guess Mama is playing with the children right now, Moore said to the group, going down the stairs. That old bat loves puppies. Wouldn't blame her, Sickle-Eye said to his brother, as Lynn and Juno entered the large infirmary. Juno flicked her ears when they said Mama so casually. Mama, Juno said with her finger on her chin, not being familiar. Mama is the old Lyconian that acts as the doctor and chief of the Wall's infirmary. Apparently, the orc brothers knew her when she was a pup too, Lynn said, while she looked around the decor, making Juno go bug-eyed. The old lady looks to be in her 60s, and the orcs supposedly knew her when she was a pup herself. She wondered who these orcs were. Text said that orcs had a lifespan of 30 years, but that only took account of killing them. The crew got closer to the curtains, ready to pull the opening inside. Yet the orcs stopped as they heard wet smacking and feminine moans and laughter. Lynn bumps her head on Sickle-Eye's back, giving him a look as she rubs her head. Then she flicks her ears to the noise. She heard it exactly when Juno did, with Lynn smirking and Juno blushing. Tarball stood behind the group, twisting her head in confusion. Moore pulls back the curtains, revealing the 2 knights in the normal rags of a peasant resting on their beds, with 2 extra bodies. One was happily smacking lips with a raven-haired infenrial, while she pinned him to the bed. He was rubbing her thigh, brushing her hair, and naturally drooped ears. The other had a white and black-haired infenrial rested on his shoulders with an embrace, making her laugh as he sucked on her pointed ear. The group stopped when they heard the curtains open. Ah, the four screamed as the two ugly mugs of orcs greeted them, as the two infenrials hugged their mates tightly. The men didn't know what to do, as they didn't have the guts to scream, only to make a high-pitched noise. "Sorry, ladies, we need these two humans for a quick chat," Moore said as he slid himself away and presented the three women. Lynn was liking the show, while Juno covered her eyes like a maiden, while Sergeant Tarbell had no words to say. The two WOF sisters got up quickly with a nervous sweat from both of them. They paced themselves in a pace walk, waving away the two Leoness knights. "I'll be back to check up on you, Glenn. I'll bring back some water, my alpha." The two ran out the doors, almost colliding with Mama, who had a bowl of soup she was blowing on. "Sorry, Mama," the two said as they vanished from their sight. Mama was stunned to see the five visitors, as she saw the Leoness knights marked with kisses and hickeys. She sighs, getting fed up with how active the young ones were getting. Oh, Lord of Order, it wasn't even a couple of years ago when I was changing those pups' diapers. Can't even get a bowl of soup, or the population goes up. She ignores the visitors, choosing to head to her desk to savor her soup. Moore's and Sicklei's jobs were finished as they tapped both the Centelope's shoulder. Moore to Lynn and Sicklei to Juno. "We have some catching up to do with a former clansman. You handle this," Moore asked of Lynn. "I trust you, Squishy," Sicklei said to Juno, who blankly stared at him for using her nickname. The two brothers dismissed themselves, walking towards the elder Lyconian. The three heard the elderly swapping pleasantries as they focused on the shivering knights. "Are we still alive, Roman?" the knight that was cuddling with the husky infenrial said, as the female before called him Glenn. "I don't know, Glenn. I don't want to open my eyes," Roman said as he slid his finger to get a peek if the orcs were still there. When he saw the floppy ears of the two Centelopes, his libido switched. "Holy heaven, there's bunny girls." "Look, Glenn, they have bunny girls," Roman said with excitement, having Lynn look at the man while she felt her daggers. Juno twitched her ears blankly, wondering if she should use some words of power. Glenn slowly opened his eyes, yet he still remained shaken in his bed. "I don't need anyone other than my lappies, Sergeant Tarbell." Glenn was the first to notice the sergeant who stood behind the two Centelopes. Roman's glazed eyes suddenly sink into fear as he sees the sergeant. "Sergeant Tarbell," he panicked, trying to wiggle on his bed, forgetting that his legs were bound over. Sergeant Tarbell felt hurt to see the knight reacting to her out of fear, like she was the last person he wanted there. Juno and Lynn slide out of her way, acting as a third party. "At ease, knight. Why does my appearance cause you alarm?" Sergeant Tarbell asked the knight with some authority in her breath. He looks around more, seeing that, in context, she is alone. "Are you with Lieutenant Darkota, ma'am?" Roman said, as if we were speaking of the Bujamin. Juno flicks her ears as she notices that the pervy man had real fear in his eyes. His heartbeat pulsed loudly as he started to breathe heavily. The sergeant didn't like how he was acting as she walked by his bed and sat down. No, my group is still separated from the main force. What did he have you guys do? She asked him as the both of them started to calm down. There was more to the arrival of the human knights than Juno thought, with leadership seeming like night and day. What didn't he have us do? That's the real question, ma'am. Glenn told his superior with a jaded expression. Sergeant Tarball didn't like his implications, as they sounded sinister. It was hard on all of us getting here to the northern parts of the triangle. When you split with the remaining members of Zeke's team, Lieutenant Darkoda slipped into madness. Glenn said as he coughed after his gut wound was spotted. We raided a caravan of beastkin not far after. We said it was all about survival, but what he made us do was nothing but a massacre. Roman added, Elias refused to kill a begging Vulpes. He killed her on the spot. Glenn said, which made Sergeant Tarball gasp. We are here on a holy mission by the soothsayer Ariana. Why is he acting senselessly killing? Tarball asked the two men. Lynn flinches at the mention of a holy mission. Anything that the soothsayer deems a necessary mission could be world-altering. We just bite down on our tongues and follow orders, ma'am. Yet every day just got worse, putting down passing beastkin as a form of cleansing on his orders. Glenn said with guilt, yet it was enough to rile up Lynn. That's how we get an infestation of ghouls. What the fuck is this man doing? Lynn said with an angry thumb, grinding her teeth. Juno could only hear in silence, as the tales from Demona now have a villain. This is madness. Surely our fellow knights would start a mutiny. We are the people of the cross. She yelled for any sort of redemption from their story. They both shook their heads, knowing how to brainwash the man of arms. Wolfslayer has been filling the troops' minds with paranoia, saying that the whole triangle is after us. Even the righteous are submitting to his claim. Roman said. Juno was fuming from this building horror story, wondering where this humanity she heard of was. How close is he? Juno asked the question, one that had the group fall into fear. Lynn was too buried in her own anger, but she trembled that Juno was ready to ask the serious questions. We ran. He marked us as traitors with the other 3 knights that wanted no more. That was 2 weeks ago. With their course, they could be here any day now. Roman answered with a shudder, causing alarm among the others. How many? Juno asked. And now Lynn was the one standing in silence. After he executed a couple of naysayers, 60 strong. Glenn told the 3 women, adding more to their dread. 60 heavily armored humans were the equivalent of a calamity. Hearing that they kill sentient over cleansing is unnerving at best. What are you humans here for anyway? Why are there so many of you? Lynn said, as if she already knew the answer, looking overwhelmingly frightened. Juno never thought she would ever see her like this, like she could take on the world itself. Juno processed their conversation, knowing that soothsayers never dealt in sentient affairs unless it was world-altering. A force of 60 is serious business. If they had more from the beginning of the journey, that would mean a world-ending event. Juno came up with a scenario, one only told within the tome of order and chaos. Revelations, Juno said with horror, which had the group give her their full attention. The end of the tome of order and chaos, where the two omnipotent ones leave the fate of the world to its inhabitants. They will choose one sentient that can ascend themselves to a higher being, one made up of mixed blood. The herald will guide him to his throne, sacrificing many sentient lives to feed his master's power. The tyrant, the one that shows the world how strong his will can be, as the tyrant isn't as strong as he, but enough to strike fear. Leviathan, a great beast, will be at his call, laying waste to all that lives that ever dare to question his rule. Juno summarizes the testament as Sergeant Tarball listens to her in silence. Her reaction was non-existent, like everything that Juno said was the real deal. Lynn noticed, drooping her ears as a way to fool herself, like it wasn't true. Lynn bites her lip as she runs at the orcs in desperation. More sickli. We all have to run away, Lynn said in a panic, causing the orcs to finish their idle chat with Mama. Juno was lost for words, not knowing what to do about this situation. Go to your people, Miss Rabbit. I'll be with you shortly, Sergeant Tarball said with conviction, letting Juno follow Lynn. What's the matter, little warrior? You never scare easily, Sickli asked Lynn, who was shaking with all the adrenaline filling her veins. We are going to have a new demon king, Lynn screamed at Sickli, while Moore and Mama gasped in horror. Lynn was a bright woman. Juno knew this from the way she held herself. She didn't have to finish the rest of the testament, as she shook their arms like a frightened child. They never saw Lynn lie to them, so they took her word as truth. Lynn, Juno, head back to the camp and warn the others. We still have a contract to fulfill, bringing Tarball's people to this castle. Moore kept his cool, but knew that it had to be true. Lynn shakes her head, not caring about the human knights, for they were the reason why she was in a panic. But Moore, Lynn wanted to reason with him that saving the knights was a lost cause. Moore already knew, shaking his head and firmly gripping her shoulders. If you see any of them, preservation of the clan becomes an immediate priority, he told the scared Centelope as she tempered her fear and nodded. We'll handle this matter. Tell Demona about it. We will be at the camp later on with Tarball. If they are safe here, that means fewer numbers for the knights. Moore told Juno, who realized that they were actually hearing vaguely about their conversation. Lynn dashes to the door, waving at Juno to follow her quickly. Juno rushes to her without a word as they both sprint back to the camp. Scene: the legs of a full-blooded Centelope made Juno feel inferior, as she lost Lynn's silhouette within the hours of running. The sun is down, as the night is dangerous to travel alone, especially when ghouls have been roaming around. She kept her pace, because Lynn didn't sound that far ahead, crashing through the forest in great haste. Juno's calves are burning. It wasn't a matter of being a half-born anymore. It was her lifestyle of studying that was failing her. Magecraft needed a minimal amount of fitness. Their academic classes never pushed students to their limits by physical means. Having jogs with her siblings is the only factor that's helping close the gap, but she still choked on her heavy breath. She saw Lynn's silhouette being illuminated by the campfire that signaled the Misfits. She closed her eyes and let her body do the thinking, letting instinct carry her to the campsite. She crashes out of the bushes and lets her fatigued body take in the well-deserved breaths it needed. She supports her weight on her knees with her hands as the multiple beads of sweat fall down her forehead. She looked up at Lynn, who was just standing there like a statue. She was looking at the group, who seemed to be in the middle of an argument. Machi was pacing back and forth, while Reinhardt tried to calm her down. Ramai was shutting herself into a cradle, as Billy and Yukon comforted her, or at least attempted to. Bullwag and Goodboy were going at it, surprising as they seemed to be great pals. "Chali, what did you do?" Lynn said in shock, as she focused her gaze on Chali, who was sitting in the middle with her head down. Juno looked well, seeing that she was wiping her hands on a cloth. What made Juno's heart skip a beat was when the cloth turned crimson. She fucked up, Lynn. She totally fucked everything up. Machi yelled as she waved her finger at Chali, as the Lyconian didn't even entertain her. Goodboy turns from Bullwag, snarling at Machi. "You were a part of it, cat," Goodboy yelled at Machi, making her hiss at him. Reinhardt pushed Goodboy on his ass, causing Bullwag to do the same to him. Reinhardt was built, so it only irritated him. "Don't you fucking touch me, fat boy." Reinhardt pushes Bullwag, causing them to enter a wrestling match, shoulder to shoulder. Ramai finally raised her eyes, seeing the two large men getting at it. "Guys, stop fighting," Ramai yelled at the both of them, only riling up Machi. "Don't yell at my man, keep yours out of his way." Machi yelled, pointing at Bullwag, which riled up Yukon and Billy. "What's your damage? We had an agreement that we wouldn't do it," Billy said to Machi, as she put her wrist on her hip with a scorn. "You voted for it as well, Billy. Sorry you act like a coward when things get real." Machi screams at Billy, who tries to contain his temper. "Why are you taking that shit from her?" Yukon directs at Billy, setting him off. "Why didn't you two vote right? If you guys were on the same page, we would have the money now." Billy yelled at his best friend and the love of his life, as they both looked at him betrayed. "Enough," Lynn screams at the Moore clan, as they all quiet themselves to their leader. She looked around, tilting her head as she was looking for something taller than the trees. Juno notices it too, that the Orcaltitan has moved from his hibernation spot. Where's Gardner? Someone tell me where Gardner is. Lynn screamed out seconds after she asked once, not having the patience right now. The crew was taken back by how she was acting, killing all the needless arguments. Ramai flipped her bangs, telling her what she knew. Gardner said that he was going to look at something disturbing the forest, leaving without telling anyone anymore. Ramai told Lynn, who didn't take the news well. She walks backwards, tripping on her foot, which makes her fall backwards. Juno saw it coming as she wrapped her arms around her armpits, lifting her up. Even Chili paused at Lynn's display, pausing from cleaning her hands. Lynn picks herself up, trying to hold back her anger. Did I stutter, Toolies? What did you guys do? Lynn said coldly, making Chili rub her face to build up the courage. We went to the Leonis camp. Chili said in great defeat, like she was reflecting on her actions now. Lynn had so many conflicting thoughts at the moment, nothing favorable for the Lyconian. She held her tongue, asking a question that she wanted to be true. Did you kill the Slayer? Lynn said, hoping that she said yes. Juno waited in suspense. If they finished the job, at least they wouldn't have a pissed-off hunter. No, he wasn't there. We had to take out some knights to escape. Chili said as she brushed her hair, knowing that was what Lynn wanted to hear. At this point, it was too late to tell them that they were supposed to save those people. Lynn covers her face with her hands, digging into her flesh out of total frustration. She falls on her knees, not knowing what her next course should be. I made sure we didn't make tracks, Lynn, I'm sorry. Chili pleads to her, which has Lynn silently shake her head. Juno puts her hand on her shoulder, trying to comfort her in her episode. Lynn then flicks her ears, getting alert as she hops up and looks around. The crew took her action as if it were their own, putting up caution. What is it, Lynn? Ramai said with a bit of fear. I hear nothing, Goodboy said with curiosity. Chili's ears went on alert, as the forest doesn't just get quiet. Sentient brains filter through the chirping, the calls and noise. Yet, when it's completely silent, that's an omen that something is going down. Nothing is a bad sign, Lynn said in a whisper. She grabs Juno's hand, pulling her closer to the group. The silence was suffocating. Juno felt like just saying anything would trigger unfortunate events. The ears of a full centelope are sharp, as she hears a slight crack close by. Get down, Lynn screams as she pulls Juno down, launching her body to tackle Chili onto the floor. It happened quickly. That was the only thing she heard before it happened. Nothing. Boom. A loud crack in the night rang, making everyone fall on the floor. It sounded a good distance away, but it was the sound of a musket. Juno looks around, but when she sees her, she screams. Ramai joins her, while the rest of the group watches. Machi, Reinhardt cried to her, as she didn't land on the floor of her own doing. Machi produced the most volatile scream as she held her gut, as the blood rushed out. She kicks at the air from the pain, her eyes clouded in tears, as a crater was formed in her gut. Lynn kicks dirt at the fire, killing the light that it produced. Reinhardt pulls her into the open area as she starts to gag on her blood. "It's okay, baby, it's okay. Just hold on a little longer." Reinhardt screams at her as she grabs onto his body with complete desperation. She was clawing hard, leaving scratches on his hide while she was losing the fight. He gave her a deep embrace as she clawed at his arms without realizing it was him. Each scratch grew weaker and weaker as she went limp, and her screams were drowned in silence. Reinhardt breaks, letting out a deep howl of pain that nobody could remedy. He cradles her lifeless body as the group could only temper themselves. Lynn looks at Reinhardt, whose flowing tears slowly grow into unyielding rage. "Reinhardt, I know what you are feeling, but stay down." Lynn pleaded with him, but he wasn't listening to anyone after the shot. Chili was beside Lynn, the adrenaline filling her body, making her breathe heavily. Juno was in the arms of Bullwag. Goodboy was beside him, flushing his body on his back. The Panrius males piled on Ramai, who was just breaking down under them. The forest fell quiet again, staying so for an entire minute. The crew didn't know what to do. The musket fire sounded meters away. Billy only lifted his head just to look if there was anything watching him. Sentient beings had that ability. Bang! Another shot was fired, silencing Billy as the ball blew out through his skull. The hot blood sprayed on Yukon and Ramai as Billy's body lay limp on top of them. Ramai screams as she cries, while Yukon pushes his corpse off of them. The blast echoed closer, sounding even more to the side. "He's flanking us," Lynn called out to her crew, rushing to the opposite site of the hunter's crosshairs. The crew did the same, yet a gourd was tossed into the middle of their position. The gourd explodes, having an allergic reaction to beastkin. It affected the whole crew, making them scatter. "No, don't separate," Lynn yelled out as she was coughing from the gas. Juno ran through the trees. She couldn't see what was right in front of her, crashing into trees and bushes. She fell on her stomach as her vision started to clear. She saw a large figure rushing towards one covered in emerald green. "Die, you bastard." It sounded like Reinhardt, swinging his axe at the hunter, who seemed to just dodge his attacks with a single motion. He was affected by the same gas. His vision should be obscured as well. The hunter dodges a final time, climbing on the back of Reinhardt and making a clicking noise. The sound of a ringing twine in her ear as Reinhardt sounded like it was choking him. "Get this thing, ah," Reinhardt screams as the sound of gears clicks. The emerald armor was pulling his arm as the string he used acted like a saw on flesh. Each pull made Reinhardt choke, each one getting wetter with blood. Reinhardt falls on his knees with the last pull of the hunter beheading him as the ground makes a plop. A Radicibus fiamis, ad solum compactum. Juno tried to whisper her words of power, but the hunter threw another gourd bomb directly at her face. It hit her nose directly, canceling her chant as the bomb blew close range. The The vapor was concentrated, filling her lungs and stinging her eyes. It burned like acid in her throat, causing her to cough violently as she fell on the floor. It had a nasty reaction, making Juno throw up her meal of the day, marking the ground with her bile. Her constant coughing made her lose breath, making her dizzy as she couldn't help herself. Then a strong force pulled on her leg, hurting from the sudden jerk of motion. She felt a heavy man on top of her as she slapped his grabs violently as she gave panic screams. Then the hunter wraps his firm glove around her throat, squeezing it with deadly intent. She flails in his grasp as the grip continues to grow tighter and tighter. She kicks her legs frantically, her body's defense mechanism as her lungs felt like popping. That was it. She felt like she was going to die. Her life flashed before her eyes as her vision began to go completely dark. Get off of her. She heard Yukon as he hit the hunter with his horns, making him grunt in pain. She crawled away as her brain was left without oxygen, as everything whirled in her head. She felt the sweet taste of air filling her lungs. Even if it stung, it filled her with so much relief. She flicks her ears when Yukon screams in the background, as the sound of a melon getting crushed fills her with anxiety. Heavy steps followed her, as she knew what was coming next. Leave her alone. Lynn grabs the hunter by his neck and launches a volley of stabs at him. He grunts in pain as his armor protects him, yet he still feels the blade puncture his flesh. He grabs her leg to anchor her as he crashes his back into a sturdy tree. He does it 3 times, each one making Lynn lose her breath. The 3rd time was enough, as she grabbed a nearby rock and struck her head. No, Juno yelled at the hunter as blood launched from Lynn's head, the first striker. Before he could deliver the final blow, Bullweg grabbed a hold of his arms, pulling him back from Lynn. Lynn grunts in pain as she looks physically concussed after the first blow. Juno crawls to Lynn, who just slams her body down on the floor after her body refuses to listen. While Bullweg held the hunter's arms, Chili dived into his front with her claws. She had enough to puncture through his armor, causing the hunter to scream in pain. She wraps her jaws around his neck, thrashing around as his neck cracks from the violent motion. He was still alive, using Bullweg's weight to kick Chili off of him, tightening his muscles to make himself heavier. Bullweg had never had a man pick him up from the floor before, as the hunter lifted him up while he locked his arms with his. The hunter's arms crunch from the strain, yet he was banking on Bullweg being bigger than him. He vaulted all of Bullweg's weight onto the floor, making his head collide with the solid dirt. Bullweg let go after his head had suffered shock trauma, vaulting over while the hunter pulled his ball-headed club. He widely charges his swing, but Goodboy grabs his club, preventing him from a final blow. He extended a fist blade from his gauntlet, stabbing the infenrial in his side, where he knew would be the most painful. He picks Goodboy up and slams him on Chili, who was going for the attack. Goodboy grabs his gut, yet he still feels alive, but the pain was enough to keep him down. Chili quickly gains her footing, rushing at the hunter with her claws. He takes her claws, gritting his teeth as he feels her blunt claws stab at him. He wraps his arms around her neck and uses his body weight to slam her face on the ground. He aims his fist blade at Chalie's throat, but Juno has already said her words of power. Eratacibus fiamis, ad solium compactum, scopum meum velat, arborum liga. She summons weak vines to ensnare his arm, as she still had been afflicted with ailments. The hunter pulls the vines off him with his strength, then walks toward Juno. He swings his leg back and kicks her face right on the nose, making her roll over. She almost got knocked out, but the pain in her nose filled her brain. It starts to bleed as she just looks at the human through her daze. He fights like a cornered animal, taking the blows, but giving it back twice as hard. Juno noticed that Ramai wasn't fighting alongside them as she looked over to Yukin's body. Ramai only wept as she hovered over Yukin's body as it twitched in her hand. A loud scream echoed in her gut, causing mild discomfort as it rang in her fading mind. The roar came from Sikalai, rushing at the hunter in a fast sprint. Juno only saw the raging orc as consecutive musket fire rings in her head. 2 shots entered his head, one in his heart, and the last on his leg. It was enough to have the orc rolling on the ground, but he acted as a distraction. Juno turns her gaze to the hunter as more squeezed his body and arms. The surprise came when she saw Sergeant Tarbell picking up his club, giving one final swing to knock out the hunter. Now that she had enough information on how the fight was going, her body drifted to sleep. She was extremely tired, and her sinuses were swollen with all the nasty smoke. Her body needed rest now. She would worry about tomorrow.